Before I found out about this band, I was never a big music fan, and this is partially to the fact that some of the bands I was listening to at the time were really bad. Creed, Nickelback. I didn't really think much at the time of Who or the Beatles or Rush or anything like that. But when Guitar Hero and Rock Band came out, I started becoming more of a fan of the rock genre in general. And while Guitar Hero did start up, the popularity of Dragon Force, which honestly all their songs kind of blend into each other, but I was somewhat of a fan of them. But the one band that really wanted me to listen to more of a certain genre was Dream Theater. The first song I ever heard by them was Panic Attack off their Octavarium album, and it was one of the last songs you unlock in Rock Band 2. I played the crud out of it, and I was listening to it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not too sure about this band. So I started asking my buddies about them, and they said the band's absolutely awesome, and they said, it's like, are you a freaking moron? Of course the band's really good. So I listened to Octavarium. I wanted to give them a shot, so I went out, bought Octavarium, and around that time, later on, I bought Black Clouds and Silver Lining. And I loved these two albums so much that when I got done with, I think it was grade 12A, I went out and bought myself tickets, which I almost didn't go see that concert because my buddy skipped out, a week ahead of time, which at least he gave me the common decency to give me that much ahead of time, which I asked him, hey, if you can't make it to the show, give me a week's notice. And my boss ended up sending me a co-worker to go see the band, and it was one of the greatest experiences I ever had in my life, and really set forward, how great of a band this was. I went back and I started listening to Systematic Chaos and all these other albums. But the whole point of this is that I want to show you my fan appreciation as we go into a little retrospective before we review their newest album, which is self-titled. Now, bear in mind, I have not listened to every Dream Theater album. I have not checked out the albums they covered, and I've not seen every DVD bit where they, took a whole bunch of their shows, songs from their shows, and put it out there. Like I have seen scenes from New York, and I do have Chaos in Motion in my collection. So let's take a ride into the history of a band that I love to death, known as Dream Theater. 6, 1989, Dream Theater debuted when they Dream Unite. I don't have personally that much history with this album. I'm not a big fan of it. I like Fortune Lies, but I'm not a big fan of Charlie Dominici's vocal style and Status Seekers. A decent song. Afterlife's pretty good. Like the Fusing Getaways, pretty decent song. But in general, I would definitely check it out if you are a Dream Theater fan, because this is where it all started. After this album, they end up getting rid of Charlie Dominici for another vocalist, which I will mention in the next album. But critical reception, the album did not receive much attention upon release, but due to Images and Words' commercial success, the album received critical reviews and criticism from many resources. AllMusic attacked the band's ability to write lyrics, despite them agreeing that some of their melodies are quite enjoyable. The album was also produced two singles, Status Seeker and Afterlife, whose remixes and single edits to radio were done by Terry Brown of Rush production fame, who continued to work with the band, producing the band's second recorded and permanent singer, Canadian James Labrie, which he recorded vocal tracks for several albums in Canada and not with the band, as well as several of Labrie's solo releases. Also, a nice side note, On the 15th anniversary of the album, Dream Theater performed in its entirety in Los Angeles during 2 additional songs in the encore. Special guests Charlie Dominici and Derek Sherinian, now both former members, performed. However, the original keyboardist Kevin Moore did not appear. The entire performance was recorded live and later released on CD and DVD under the title When Day and Dream Reunite through Mike Portnoy's independent label Yeast Jams. The album also featured a live version of Metropolis Part 1, which was originally from the album Images and Words and performed on a B-side called To Live Forever. This is definitely an album I would check out. Even if you're a fan of Dream Theater, definitely check it out for, if no other reason, historical purposes. But personally, I'm not a big fan. 1992, Dream Theater would release Images and Words. The album itself is personally one of my most favorite albums of all time. At this time, they got rid of original singer Charlie Dominici for Canadian singer James LaBrie. And this feels like a big old piece falling into place. Dream Theater had 3 hits, singles from this album: Pull Me Under, Another Day, and Take the Time. And to really display the band off, these were 3 really good songs to use. Pull Me Under's a great 8-minute 11-second track. Take the Time is commonly used as an encore. Another Day's another really good song. Metropolis Part 1. What can I say? The song eventually got a sequel, but instead of just a song, it became a full album. Under a Glass Moon is a great song. Wait for Sleep's a nice little bit. Learning to Live is probably one of my most favorite songs by Dream Theater ever. On release, the album was met with universal acclaim, and many critics and fans cite the album as a landmark release for the progressive metal genre. The album received an RIA certificate of gold, the band's only studio album to date to do so. On April 9, 2003, Images and Words won Loudwire's fan voted March Metal Madness for Best Metal Album of All Time. Music critic Pierre Scaruffi included the album at number 8, just after Fear Factory's Demanufactured and before Sepulture's Roots in the classification of the best metal albums of all time. Song Under Glass Moon was also awarded the 98th Best Guitar Solo by Guitar World magazine, and in 2001, Images and Words was ranked number 7 on Guitar World's Top 10 Greatest Albums of 1992. Now, this is just all hearsay. I'm just finding, cool little bits of information on the album. But personally, this is damn near perfect album. It's just missing a little something. I'm not sure what it is, but this is not my most favorite Dream Theater album, which we'll go into eventually. But this is definitely one to check out if you want to start listening to the band or listen to their old stuff. This is where you go to, because this is a freaking incredible album. Around time producing and writing for Awake would go into production, Kevin Moore, the original keyboardist for Dream Theater, would leave the band, and a new keyboardist was brought in Derek Sherinian. Now this, I don't know, I would somewhat call it a bit of a jinx on it, but their next album, Awake, was pretty much considered a bomb. Awake peaked at number 32 in the Billboard's Top 200 and remained in the charts for 6 weeks. This would remain the band's highest charting release in the U.S. until 2007's Systematic Chaos. The album peaked in the top 20 in 4 countries. Derek Oliver, Dream Theater's label representative, considered the album to be a commercial failure. This led to the band once again working with David Prater on a change in seasons to the record label, putting increasing pressure on the band to make songs on their next album falling to infinity more commercial and radio friendly. It was, to some extent, it is a bomb because since its release, it has only released, it's only sold about 400,000 copies. So to some extent, I would consider it a bomb. But there are some really good tracks on here. I don't really care for the song 6 O'Clock. I do like Cotton Web. Lifting Shadows Off a Dream is a classic. Voice is a pretty good track. You know, plus the reviews on it were actually pretty dang good on it. You know, critics praised it for being, just in general great album, but it just didn't sell. On September 19th, 1995, Dream Theater would release a Change in Season. The album's more of a just one track and a bunch of different covers. Like there's a cover of, Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding, Perfect Strangers by Deep Purple, The Rover by Led Zeppelin, Achilles' Last Stand, Song Remains the Same, In the Flesh by Pink Floyd, Carry On Wayward Son, Bohemian Rhapsody, Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin', Cruise Control by Dixie Dregs, and Turn Again by Genesis. But the title song itself, Changing Seasons, it's definitely worth the price of admission, even if you don't like the covers of Carry On My Wayward Son or Cruise Control or Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin'. Changing Seasons is a awesome 23-minute long epic track that grabs your attention and holds you there till you finish it. This was another Derek Sherinian keyboard album, but still, it's in general really good. I would definitely go check out Changing Seasons, even if it's just the track, which I'm gonna more or less cover it because I'm covering all the studio stuff. But Changing Seasons, check it out if you're a big fan of the band. 1997, Dream Theater released the biggest commercial failure and the most panned album of their whole career, known as Falling Into Infinity. Again, another run at it with Derek Sherinian, and this time it bombed. It was panned by critics alike and was a commercial failure. Plus, this would have been an entirely different album if Portnoy would have had, complete creative control on it. And after it's released, Dream Theater said, "Hey, we want to do these albums without any of your, fingers in it, screwing with it." It wasn't until 2007 when Portnoy would release his original arrangements and track listings. Plus, this was the hardest album for the band to work on, and rumor has it there's some pending rumors that Dream Theater might have broken up after this album. Portnoy was slowly starting to get fed up with the BS of the whole record industry and all that, and he was thinking of disbanding the band and moving on to better things. And thank God they didn't, because we wouldn't have great albums now like Octavarium. We wouldn't have Scenes from a Memory. We wouldn't have Systematic Chaos or Train of Thought, which I'm going to go into all those later on in this video. But Falling Into Infinity, not the worst album in the world. I think there are some positive elements to it. Trail of Tears, great song. You Not Me is a pretty decent song. Lines in the Sand, still pretty good. Take Away My Pain's a pretty decent song. But in general, for historical purposes, this album by all rights sucked because, Portnoy didn't have creative control over it. And, it did some good things for the band. They became a free form, as some people like to call it. Basically, they had full creative control. They would tell them, the album will be done when it's done, goddammit. And if you want to rush us, guess what? You get another flop. You're going to get another hack job like Falling Into Infinity, and something that quite possibly could be 10 times worse than freaking Awake. So that album didn't really sell well. People accused the band of selling out. But it was more because of, the whole record industry pushes you to put out something that's more mainstream because they think it will sell better. All I gotta say is, just put out a good album. That's all I want from this band. Dream Theater's more of a band that it grows on you, that, it's one of these songs that really grow on you over time. You look at some of their best stuff, like Changing Seasons and all that. You may not get what makes them so good on the first listen, but on the fourth or fifth listen, you'll get like, oh, these guys are just really freaking great. In 1999, Dream Theater would release their most ambitious album to date, quite possibly, and the most successful album as far as critical reception, Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. Fans have been demanding a sequel to Metropolis Part 1, The Miracle and Sleeper. What they didn't realize was that they weren't going to get a song, they were going to get an entire album set in this whole world. The whole album feels like a concept album, like The Who's Tommy album or 2112 by Rush. And it's a solid album beginning to end. It really does tell a really compelling storyline. So the whole thing is based around this guy. He's going in to see a psychiatrist, and I'm trying to explain this without giving away the plot or anything like that, because this is an album you gotta experience for yourself. So this guy goes in to see a psychiatrist about some of the stuff he's been seeing in his dreams, but he's getting brought into this whole world, and he's just seeing different events happening before him, and this whole lovers quarrel, and it has a very, thought-provoking ending to it all, which wraps it up very well. I love this album beginning to end. This is an album you sit through. You may not get on your first listen. You may have to get on your third, your fourth, maybe your fifth listen. In general, I love this album beginning to end, and it is my most favorite of all time. And the critical reception also reflects somewhat. Critical reception to the album was very favorable. It reached number 73 on the Billboard 200 album chart, number 2 on the Billboard Top Internet Albums, number 6 on the Finnish album charts, and number 8 on the German album charts. The album was ranked number 95 on the October 2006 issue of Guitar World magazine. It's a list of 100 great guitar albums of all time. It's ranked 15th on greatest concept albums as of March 2003 by Classic Rock magazine, and the German Rock Hard magazine voted Album of the Month, giving it a perfect score. Eventually ranked at number 410 in their book of the 500 greatest rock and metal albums of all time. In 2012, the readers of Rolling Stone voted the album number 1 position for their favorite prog rock album of all time. This is definitely my most favorite Dream Theater album, and the reception was fairly well received. They eventually played a live variation where they played the whole thing, and they did a couple of extra songs on it, second disc. And the whole thing is called Live Scenes from New York. If you haven't seen it or you don't have it in your collection and you're a Dream Theater fan, go out, buy it. Do what you have to. I don't know. Kill a hooker, grab money, go find a copy of it on eBay. Now that's not that I'm justifying it, but if you are a big Dream Theater fanboy like myself, and you don't have this in your collection, what are you doing? Go out and pick it up. Dream Theater would release 6 Degrees of Air Turbulence on January 29, 2002. This was another concept album exploring different themes of lifetime struggle, such as alcoholism, losing faith, self-isolation, sanctity of life, and the 6th song, a 42-minute long track occupying the entire second disc, separated into 8 parts that went into different forms of mental illnesses, such as bipolar, post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia, autism, postpartum depression, and this personal disorder. I've never really sat through this entire album. Every single time I try to listen to it, it would, just push me away. It's like, I'd be like, maybe I'm mentally, not ready for this album, because I've gone through different mental problems. I'm still fighting, I'm still having a bout of depression, and they're trying to figure out if I have ADHD or not. Well, anyway, this also started the first 12-step suite, which track The Glass Prison was the beginning of that whole thing, which would eventually end on Black Clouds and Silver Lining with The Shattered Fortress. So definitely check this one out. I'm definitely going to have to review this album eventually and give it more thought-provoking thoughts on this album. 2003, Dream Theater would release their darkest sounding album ever in Train of Thought. This album altogether was a really good, solid, well-rounded album. As I Am is a great song. This Dying Soul is a great song. Endless Sacrifice is really good. Honor Thy Father, Vacant, Stream of Consciousness, In the Name of God. All of them really good tracks. Real quick into some of the tracks. This also brought the second part of the suite with This Dying Soul. I think it was Mother. Cool facts about the lyrics of Vacant were inspired by James LaBrie's daughter, who fell into a short coma after suffering a sudden unexplained seizure 3 days for her 7th birthday. Stream of Consciousness is the longest instrumental, unless we consider instrumentality. But it's a solid, dark album. I'm not a big fan of darker Dream Theater stuff, but for some reason I like the stuff on here. Love It, Endless Sacrifice, Love, Honor Thy Father, As I Am, In the Name of God. Just a very well-rounded album. The only problem I really have is that I'm not a big fan of their darker stuff, so that's personal preference. But still, definitely a solid album you should check out. 2005, Dream Theater would release the album that I listened to the most, Octavarium. This is an awesome album, and considering the time I was listening to it, I didn't discover this till I think 2008 or 2009. At the time, I was going to high school. I was going through grade 12, and I was lifting weights. I decided that I wanted to get into wrestling really badly, and this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Then they told me my eye was severely damaged, like I could barely see out of it, but if I severely damaged my other eye, I could be considered legally blind. So I kind of fell into a low state of depression. So playing games weren't helping me get over this fact. Wrestling only, just pissed me off more, because this was an industry I wanted to get into. Like, I didn't care, what had happened for this. I went through the deaths of A. Guerrero and Chris Benoit year after year, and watching this product getting worse, and my buddies were hyping me up to be the next Chris Benoit. So I was poking around at bands that I could listen to, like Iron Maiden, Pantera. This was the first Dream Theater album I went out and bought, and thank God I did, because this was an album I was hoping I was the last guy in at work to just so I could sit there and just pick apart how awesome it was. These Walls is a really good song. I Walk Beside You is a really good song. Panic Attack's an awesome song, which is one of the last songs you unlock on Rock Band 2. Never Enough's another great song. Sacrifice Sons had this whole lyrical bit dealing with the whole wars and stuff like that. And the title track, Octavarium, 24 minutes long. It was one of those songs I had to sit through 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 times just to really get how good it was. This is definitely, my starting point on listening to the band. And and I loved every second of it. But and yeah, that's all I have to say on it. I'm not gonna go into critical reception or anything like that. In 2007, Dream Theater would release Systematic Chaos. Now, at first, I absolutely hated this whole album, but I listened to it, and 2 years later, I was having a hard time getting it, but eventually I got what made it so good, because at the time I was a big fan of darker, Dream Theater stuff, and I just did not get what made some of it so good, and some of it was kind of depressing, and at the time I was having my first bout with depression, and I didn't really care for songs like Mystery of Lost Souls. I didn't get Prophets of War or Repentance, or I liked Dark Eternal Night. I liked Forsaken, and I liked the Presence of Enemies, but the general sound of it I didn't really care for until 2 years later when I did just get it. And the entire thing's just solid. The whole Presence Enemies, they didn't want to have another 24-minute long song that was on the album before and on this one, so they split it up, the first part being the first track and the second part being the second track. A lot of great songs on here, a lot of great memories. Listen to it on the way to work and biking way to work. It got somewhat favorable reviews, and the album peaked in the top 25 in the United Kingdom and Australia, where the band never previously charted. In the United States, the album peaked at 19th position on the Billboard 200, making it the highest peaking Dream Theater album in the U.S. at the time of its release. Overall, Systematic Chaos peaked in the top 20 album sales in 8 countries. In the U.S., the album sold 35,689 copies in the first week it was released, and that was partially due to Constant Motion being a downloadable song for Rock Band, so that had a little bit in there, but not a lot. Definitely an album I would check out if you want to listen to one of the better albums of their modern works. In 2009, Dream Theater would release Black Clouds and Silver Lining with a track list of only 6 songs, and 3 of them being 4 being 10 minutes plus long, and all of them having a kind of cool theme. Nightmare to Remember was about a car accident I believe John Petrucci was in. Shattered Fortress wrapped up the whole 12-step suite. The Best of Times was actually a song written by Mike Portnoy as a tribute for his father, because his father, I think, was dying at time. He eventually played at his funeral, and in the interviews he said he never wants to play that song live because he would think about the funeral and he would think about his dad. And the whole Black Clouds and Silver Lining tour was the first concert. The one in Toronto was the first one I ever went to as part of Live Nation, where they played with Scale of the Summit, Big Elf, and Zappa plays Zappa, but that's getting away from the point. Every single song on this album is solid, but it doesn't really get away from the whole feeling of a Dream Theater album. It feels like it's not so much they were trying to reinvent themselves, but they're like, okay, this is what worked in Train of Thought and Systematic Chaos. Let's refine this and make some really good songs here. Count of Tuscany was a story about an encounter with the Count of Tuscany. Withers, a great 5-minute long song about having writer's block. A Rite of Passage was, I forgot what the track was all about. I'm gonna have to look up the lyrics again, but anyway, this was the album that solidified them as a really great musical band. This made me go, okay, I'm listening to more of this band. I'm gonna listen to, their older stuff, their newer stuff. There was also a special edition that had instrumental versions of all the songs on there, and had covers of different songs, such as Take Your Fingers from My Hair by Randy Jackson, Lark's Tongues of the Aspect Part 2, Robert Fripp, King Crimson. I'm just trying to read off some of the tracks. Stargazer by Rainbow, Tenement, Funster, Flick of the Wrist, Lily in the Valley by Queen, Odyssey by Dixie Dregs, Take Your Fingers from My Hair by Zebra, Lark's Tongues in Aspect Part 2 by King Crimson, and To Tame a Lamb by Iron Maiden. I haven't really listened to like the instrumental versions or the covers on the 3-disc bit, but it's definitely something I'm gonna be looking up. So if you're again, this is another album I would 100% recommend you go check out. In 2010, in my opinion, the frontman of Dream Theater and drummer Mike Portnoy said that he would be leaving Dream Theater, and to pretty much wrap up my personal opinion of him leaving, considering that, I think a year ago his father died around the release of Black Clouds and Silver Lining. He got done touring with Dream Theater and Iron Maiden for that tour, which I really wish I could have saw. Then afterwards he played drums for Avenged Sevenfold, I'm trying to think of the album that had Nightmare on it, which made that album a fair bit better than it actually was. Or actually could have been if the Rev was alive. Not wishing death on anybody. But, I can understand his burnout on the whole band. Originally he wanted to take 5 years off, then he reduced it to about a year, and everybody's like, no, not having it. So he left. He would eventually start up Adrenaline Mob, be with them for 3 years, and now he's doing Winery Dogs. Personally, my personal opinions on Portnoy, I can understand where he was coming from, but I think in the long term, I think you're gonna be better off without the band, and the whole thing having a mental strain because the high expectations that a lot of progressive metal fans have for this band. But I can understand where you're coming from. So in 2010, the search began for a new drummer. They would eventually pick up Mike Mangini to play in his place. Now, in 2011, they would release a dramatic turn of events. I can speak today, derp. But anyway, a dramatic turn of events had all the bits for Mike Portnoy already written in. This 9-track album has some solid stuff, but it's really nothing that's gonna leave an imprint on you. Don't get me wrong, I like On the Backs of Angels. I like Build Me Up, Break Me Down. I love This Is the Life, Bridges in the Sky, Outcry. Don't really care for Far From Heaven. Love the Breaking All Illusions. Beneath the Surface, I Could Live Without. Lost Not Forgotten is, a decent enough song. But in general, it's just for the band, it's a meh album, but still a decent album. If you're a fan of Dream Theater, again, you're gonna find a lot of stuff to enjoy. But if you're a longtime fan, you're gonna find stuff that's like, I'm not a big fan of, and it's not gonna leave an imprint on you, like A Change in Seasons, or Scenes from a Memory, or Images and Words. Now, I could go into all the side stuff, all their, concert videos, such as, trying to think of some albums, Once in a Lifetime, live scenes from New York, Chaos in Motion, and the list goes on and on, all their cover albums, stuff like that. But I would be here for about an hour, maybe 2 hours going over them. But I just want to go into this so you'll understand somewhat of my disappointment with their newest album, which will be the next Veil. Now, in general, my top 3 would probably go in this order: Scenes from a Memory, images and words, and just on the basis of the song alone, a change in seasons. But if we're talking entire album, I would probably have to go with Black Octavarium, and that was a hard decision to make for me because Black Clouds and Silver Lining was the album that made me go, okay, these guys are for real. Octavarium was the first album I ever got by them, but at the end of the day, the first album I ever got by them, outweighs the fact that legitimize, an album for me. So tune into the next video where I will go into the big disappointment.